A Funny Taste in Music with Andrew Bird.
Hello, welcome to A Funny Taste in Music. This one, looking forward to this. This is with Ian Stone. Now, Stoney is a comedian I've gigged with for years and years. He's kind of one of them who's like a headliner when I started, and I felt a bit intimidated by. Now I think of him as like a proper mate. But before, because he doesn't stand for any bullshit. I remember once saying to him, I just don't get time to write. I'm just tired. I've got kids. I don't get any time. And he said to me, J.K. Rowling wrote her books with a child on her lap. And that was it. And I thought, all right, Stoney, Jesus. But I kind of got what he was saying. He doesn't take any shit. There's no excuses with him. I like that about him. But I read his book. He's written a book called To Be Someone, and it's about the Jam. It's about his obsession with the Jam. But it's not just about that. It's about adolescence and growing up and just loving music. And so I didn't want his to be the first podcast because I thought, well, he's written a book about loving music. It's a bit of a gimme for an interview, innit? You know what I mean? It's like asking Gary Lineker about football. It's a bit easy. But I thought, if this isn't a great podcast, it's my fault. And this is a great podcast, so it's not my fault. It's really great to talk to him about how much he loves the Jam. His book is available. It's called To Be Someone. In the link for the description of the podcast, go there. I can't recommend this book enough. I don't read a lot of books, so maybe you shouldn't really take my word for it, but I know a good one when I read it, I think. And this is bloody brilliant. God, that's I shouldn't sell people stuff for them. He'll be absolutely appalled with this, but you've got to buy it. And in the description of this episode, if you click on it, there's a link to Spotify, and there'll be a playlist that goes with this. And all the songs we mention, there'll be a song so you can go straight to it and go, it's brilliant. So you can go straight to that. So that would be great. So this is Ian Stone, and I really, really enjoyed this. Hope you enjoy it.
A Funny Taste in Music. The interview next.
Who else have you spoken to?
First one was Jared Christmas. That was a mistake.
Right.
No, it was
Does he
really
need
good.
a mic? You could just open the window of his house, you could hear him, surely.
Yeah. No, he was really good, but as he said himself, he started off by going, I'm not really into a band, but then proceeded to say all the bands he loves. But he just generally loves all loads of music. But
Great.
And then the next one was someone you've probably spoke to about bands a bit, I imagine, Ben Norris.
Me and Ben have discussed music on occasion, yes. In fact, we've been to see live music on occasion.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, well, that was it was great. Something like, the first single he ever bought. This is a weird one. He was 7 in Woolworth's Bohemian Rhapsody at 7.
Right.
I'm recording, by the way. I thought you'd started. So,
he does this. He bloody does this.
Right.
He likes a natural start.
Yeah.
This will be on it, this bit.
Yeah. I'm happy to go with it, really.
Yeah, let's not dabble with professionalism now. Right. Now, this should be, Ian, because I want, what this is, as you already probably know, is I wanted to do a podcast talking to comedians about music. And because most comedians love music, and it's funny talking to them about music, and I thought, I'll have to prize out of some comedians what bands they love. Well, you've written a brilliant book called To Be Someone, and it's about your obsession with the Jam. So this podcast should be a piece of piss because you've articulated it absolutely perfectly. So if it's not, then it's purely my fault. Right. Yeah. So now we're going to start off with me praising your book. It's not going to be comfortable for you, so brace yourself. Because I absolutely loved it. I read it with the stereo on low in the background with the Jam playing, like having Christmas carols on while decorating. I got in the mood and everything while reading it. Absolutely loved it.
It's great to hear the tunes again, isn't it? I mean, I don't know how much you heard them in the first place.
Well, not as much because I'm I don't want to be annoying. I say it like it is. I'm a little bit younger. It wasn't my generation. I didn't grow up with the Jam, but I loved the Jam when I was younger. Yeah. And know all the main songs. I don't know as many as I should now that I've read your book. realise how many other great songs there are. I should know all of them.
I don't want you to feel like you're deficient in your Jam sort of knowledge of the oeuvre just because, you know, I happen to basically obsess about them for 5 years and buy every single album they ever produced. But
when they're that good, songs, you should. Yeah.
You're right. But then there's loads of music that there is loads and loads. I mean, I've got people on Twitter who go on about Joni Mitchell. I haven't listened to a huge amount of Joni Mitchell. I probably should. I've got another mate who's a massive fan of Johnny Cash. I think, well, you know, I know the stuff from Folsom Prison and that's it. And so, yeah, there's always good other music to catch up on that you don't know about. And that's what I hope the book does for the Jam to a certain extent.
It does exactly. That's what it is with music, isn't it? It's a constant game of catch-up. You'll never go, well, I think I've done everyone's back catalogue now. It's constant. But with your book as well, I tried to time it, because I bought it when it came out, then lockdown happened, which should be a good time to read, but not when you got two little dicks to homeschool, so I didn't get time to read. And then I knew we were having this chat, and I thought, right, I'm going to time it so I finished the book the day before I talk to you. Because it's not often you finish someone's book and then talk to them. It's quite weird talking to you now. I feel like I really know. I feel like I've been with you for a fortnight.
Well, that's the interesting thing. A lot of people have said to me, oh, they feel like they know me a bit better. Because obviously I did talk about some quite dark stuff that went on in my childhood. And I wanted to share it with people. Well, that's nice. That's nice that you say that because you want the person you want yourself to come across, don't you, when you write something like this? And I feel like it did. So
well, it is nice because it means you've written a really good book, but also at the same time it suggests you give nothing of yourself in person.
Well, no. Do you know what I would say to that? That's funny you say that. I would say that until recently, I didn't used to talk about myself on stage very much.
No, you didn't.
I talked about politics and the news and, you know, topical, satirical stuff. And it was obviously all filtered through me, but I didn't really talk about my upbringing and my family, and I've sort of got the taste for it a bit now. So I'm thinking I might be a bit more personal when we finally come back after this COVID stuff.
Yeah, well, a lot of it, as you said, was pretty dark, but you made it really funny, proper funny. But that's the thing about the book as well, is if anyone's listening to this, like I said, it's called To Be Someone. And if anyone's like straight away, you must have thought people will go, oh, it's just a book about the Jam. But it's not a book about the Jam. It's a book about like I didn't grow up in the 70s listening to the Jam. I didn't go to a Jewish school like you. I didn't grow up in London. But it's just, to me, it's not a book about that, is it? It's a book about being an adolescence, about being frustrated and angry and an obsession with a band that you love. So the obvious question, I know it's obvious, but for you, why was it the Jam? Because the Clash were around at the time, the Pistols were kind of around the same time, weren't they?
Yeah.
Why specifically the Jam?
We were. I tend to think. I mean, when people read the book, they do see how grim it was in the 1970s. But the music was great. There was a lot of very, very good music around. It was a sort of reaction to prog rock and glam rock and what have you, and then suddenly these bands turned up, the Clash, like you say, and the Pistols. Why the Jam? I don't know. I just think that they were the ones that spoke to me. I was disillusioned, sort of angry kid, really, and Paul Weller, who was only 4 or 5 years older than me, and is still only 4 or 5 years older than me, in fact. He spoke to me in a way that the others didn't. He sang about urban deprivation and social injustice and police brutality and violence on the streets. And those were the things that I was seeing when I was walking around London, and it connected with me. I mean, I wasn't alone. There was thousands of us who felt the same way. But it was good to have someone who was ostensibly an adult basically articulating the same things that I was thinking. So I heard In the City, a song about police brutality, and I thought, yes, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm hearing about, and here's someone who's not much older than me articulating it with such brilliant tunes. And that's why. I mean, it's not that I didn't like the Clash or the Pistols or Susie and the Banshees or any of the other, the Stranglers, but the Jam were really the ones who just hit me in the side of the head.
Yeah, I know it's quite hard. I know it's quite a hard question because it's quite hard to put your finger on it, isn't it? Really, but it's weird as well that he's like, because you'd have been like 14 or something, and he was
13,
not only
14, yeah.
He was only a bit. He must have seemed like an adult to you at the time, but he was really young.
He was 18. He was 18 when he wrote some of these songs, and it's unbelievable the songs that he wrote at the age that he wrote them. And a lot of the kids just went, "Yes, he's the guy." I mean, for me, I've sort of talked about this, and I came to this conclusion a little bit through talking about the book. Was that he was a sort of big brother that I never really had, a sort of a male role model.
Yeah.
As you've read the book, you know that my father was. He's a lot of things, and he's a funny guy, Ken, but he's, as I described him, the most useless adult human I've ever met in my life. And I needed a male role model, and Paul really was the guy who I sort of latched onto.
Right. Yeah, because you were 14 when... Can you describe that again? I love that in the book. Seeing them... Simon, your friend, who's in the book a lot.
Yes.
Was it him who told you about the Jam first?
He mentioned it to me. We went to school together. He was one of my only mates at school, and he kept telling me about this band, the Jam. You must see the Jam. They're great. And I sort of brushed him off a little bit, because I was an idiot, and I didn't really know any better. And then I heard I used to listen to John Peel's show on Radio 1.
Yeah.
And a lot of Radio 1 DJs. Noel Edmonds and Dave Lee Travis and all the rest of them. I mean, they were. Can we say wankers? They were wankers, basically. They were wankers. There's no getting away from it. Full of themselves, pompous, egotistical idiots. And John Peel was not like that. John Peel was also quite young and seemed quite cool, and he liked football, and not many people admitted to liking football so much at that time. And he used to play all the punk music, all the new wave stuff, and all the stuff that the kids were listening to. And he played the Jam, and I remember being in my room at 14, and he said, "This next one is In the City by the Jam." And as soon as I heard that first chord, I thought, this is the band that Simon was talking about. And that so began the obsession is not too strong a word, I think.
No, it's not. It's not with music, no. But you remember seeing them on Top of the Pops for the first time. Did you watch that?
I remember seeing them on Top of the Pops. There were a couple of youth programs that were on around that time as well. Something else was maybe a bit later than that. There were a few, and I remember seeing them a few times. And that's when I started pestering my mum to let me go and see them. But I was only 14, and she felt it was a bit worrisome to go into the West End at night to the Marquee or something, so she didn't let me go. But I listened to the music all the time and thought about them a lot. And when a new single came out, we'd go down to Wild Price Records, bunk off school, and go down to Wild Price Records on Camden High Road and buy the tunes. We'd bring radios into to school to listen to the chart show on Mondays or Friday or whenever it was. I can't remember. So if they went to number one, I mean, yeah, of course, I loved them. And they were, and the thing about the Jam as well is they got better. I love the early tunes, but I think the songwriting got better and better, and so that was a journey I was happy to jump on board for.
Yeah, you pestered your mum for ages to go see it. It seems ridiculous now. To be fair, I'm on her side a bit. 14, 15, going into London, especially at that time with all the violence and all that. There was fights at gigs all the time, weren't there?
Yeah, but the ridiculous thing was that I was going to football all that time. I was watching Arsenal away. I had a Saturday job in the Co-op round the corner, and so when Arsenal were playing, when it wasn't on a Saturday, I'd go and see them away from home. So I'd travel up to Bristol or Stoke or Derby or places that hated people from London. Yeah. And in a big mob of people, and there'd be violence, and I got knocked down by a police horse in Bristol and all sorts of other stuff. And yet my mother seemed happy for me to go to football on a Saturday, but she wouldn't let me go to town of a Friday night to go and see bands. So I spent a year and a half sulking, really, and being an absolute twat.
I can kind of understand though, because football violence seems a bit more organised, doesn't it? You know it. You know what you're dealing with. You see it on the telly, I suppose, for parents. Whereas they don't know what they're dealing with gigs because they've seen it.
I agree, but I think if my mother had seen what was going on at the football, she wouldn't have let me go there either. You know,
good point.
I mean, I got chased 3 miles back to Lime Street Station. Right, I was wearing a sheepskin coat, and a load of Liverpool fans wanted to nick my sheepskin coat. And I swear to you, running 3 miles in a sheepskin coat, I mean, I lost some weight on that run. Yeah. I really did, and you know, it was ridiculously dangerous. Cardiff, I remember going to Cardiff, and it was so dangerous. Way more dangerous than gigs, I thought. In fact, I knew. But my mother resisted for quite some time. She let me go in the end, but it took some persuading.
Yeah, that first gig, what I like the way you describe it in the book, you describe a first gig like properly in the book. It doesn't start with them walking on stage when you go see a band for the first time. You describe it right from looking at the tickets. That's where it starts, isn't it? When you get the tickets to see a band for the first time, that's where the excitement starts. Yeah, and you deciding what to wear.
I wanted to really see if I could have a proper rummage about in my memory and just take people back to that time as much as I could. Because I think if a book is worth reading, I think it's worth reading because of the details. You know, a number of people have said to me, goodness, how do you remember all this stuff? And I thought, well, with great difficulty. But, you know, you really try and remember the details. And I remember that was a huge moment in my life. You know, when Simon says to me he's got tickets to the Music Machine, 21st of December, 1978. And I'm thinking, oh, my gosh, my first ever indoor gig, you know, because I've been to the Rock Against Racism March. But that was an outdoor thing, and that was a slightly different thing. But this is the Jam at the Music Machine, and it was the last day of school that term. Oh. And so you can imagine we're bouncing off the walls, all of us. And then going home and putting on, you know, the best sort of mod outfit I could find. And, the whole thing was tremendously exciting.
In the book, the deliberation between, they're going full suit and parka. I'm going to have to go Harrington jacket. I'm going to have to go Fred Perry T-shirt on this.
Yep.
I love that. I can imagine that.
Well,
that's what it was like when you were a teenager going out, but going to see the band that you love.
I'll tell you what's interesting, actually. I through writing the book, I got to meet Paul Weller. And a very nice chap he is too. And he gave me a lovely quote for the front cover.
Yeah.
Which is, I really like this book. I'd forgotten how shit it was in the 70s. Bless him.
It's perfect.
It's the first thing he ever said to me. The first, hello Ian, it's Paul Weller. And then he said that. And I went, can I have it as a quote on the front cover? And he went, yes. But
could have hung up then. That'll do.
That would do. Thank you, Paul. That would do me. But if you talk to Weller for any length of time, clothes are one of his big obsessions. He can remember He can remember shoes he bought when he was 10. He can remember suits and jackets and all the rest of it. Now, I'm not on that level of obsession, but I do like my clothes, and I do. That was one of the big things for me, as to what to wear to the gig. I mean, it was a big moment for me. So, yeah, I did. I wanted to write that down and let people know. And then the gig itself was everything I hoped it would be.
Yeah, you described that. Really, your first beer as well. What a day! You finished school, seen the Jam, your first ever beer. What a day! And you got the date for it as well. But I like what you described really well. That I think people, I didn't think anyone else noticed that. I like the bit where the lights come up after a support act, and you see the roadies setting up for the band you were about to see. You see them putting the mic stand where it's got all of that you described perfectly. I love that. And then the soul tunes that were played before.
Oh, well, I mean that to me, because there were 3 other bands, you know, there was Pogue Mahone, or the Nipple Erectors as they were called then, which later became the Pogues, Shane MacGowan in the Tutu, the Gang of Four, who were sort of, they were a punk band of sorts, but it was a bit more political, way more political than I was ready for at that point, if I'm totally honest with you. I'd sort of re-listened to them a little bit lately. and then a sort of rock reggae band called Jab Jab. And then they cleared the stage, and all that was left was a drum kit and a couple of mic stands. And I like that very bare sort of stage that, you know, we're ready for the main event. And also the drum kit was obviously further back because this was the main band on now, and a bit of Dry Ice. And then they played, and then the lights came down, and they played these soul tunes. And like I say, Land of a Thousand Dances is always a tune I really associate with the Jam. And then John Weller walked out. Paul Weller's dad walked out and went, "Please welcome the best fucking band in the world, the Jam." And on they came, and I was 10 foot from the stage. And look, I've said this before. It was the most exciting moment of my life. I don't think anything has been. I'm 15, and these are seminal, formative moments, aren't they?
Would you put that above, as an Arsenal fan, above 89 when they won the league in the last minute against Liverpool?
Yeah, of course. I mean,
You still put that above?
no, because
It's different.
Well,
but-
I wasn't at Anfield, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, winning the league at Anfield in 1989 was an amazing thing, but I wasn't there. I was watching it at my mate Tracy's house with my friend Graham, and he was just laughing at me, jumping around the room, and that was a great moment, of course. But the Jam, this was the first time I'd seen a band live indoors in a venue, in a hot, sweaty venue with 1,000 other kids. Of course it was. I've never had a moment like that.
No, so it's about 1,000. That's a really good size, isn't it, for your first gig? About that.
Perfect, perfect size. The Music Machine, or Coco as it's now called,
I didn't know that. Is that the Coco?
That's
didn't know
Coco
that.
in Mornington Crescent. That's when I first.
I've
saw
been
them.
there, but I didn't know that it used to be called that. Right, that's
Yeah.
a great
The Music
venue.
Machine. It is a great venue. A lot of great bands have played there. I believe that Bon Scott of AC/DC had his last evening alive in that venue before he sadly drunk himself to death.
Right.
So it's got some history. It's got some music history, that venue. And I mean, a lot of the bands used to play there. You can look at lineups from 1977, 78, and you'll see Susie and the Banshees and Ian Dury and the Blockheads and the Clash and various other bands. And the Jam played it quite a lot, and that was the first one we went to.
That's a great first gig. And it's walkable, isn't it, from your house, did you say?
Not from my house. I used to go to school at Jewish Free School in Camden, so about half a mile up the road on Camden Road, and I do talk about that quite a bit in the book. But I went home first because I couldn't go to the gig in school uniform because we probably wouldn't get served at the bar. So
it's a giveaway, isn't it?
I went home, got changed, and then we came out again for the gig, which was a late night gig anyway.
It's a great first gig story. I love it. So then you're a massive fan immediately. Well, you already were, and then right, because I didn't grow up in the 70s, and you kind of sound really ignorant, but you kind of from what you hear from like documentaries and seeing stuff and all that, I don't think it quite from your book even hearing stuff about the violence in the 70s and how divided it was and Thatcher and. You know, even knowing most of that generally, you still can't know what it was like. And even reading your books, there was bits I was going, Jesus Christ, just violence constantly, wasn't it?
Yes.
And,
there was a low level of violence which was always out there. That's the truth of it. I mean, the book actually starts with a Sham 69 gig that I went to in 1979, which was known as Sham's Last Stand. And was the single most violent thing I've ever seen in my life, and I'd also described that in quite a lot of detail at the start of the book. And I know it makes people laugh, but I also think, really, is this what it was like? You know, skinheads doing Nazi salutes and general violence. There was a lot of violence. There was. I mean, people didn't get stabbed in the same way that they're doing now. These awful attacks you see now, but the low level danger that was really always out there was something that you learned to live with. And but I did want to make sure that people. I didn't want to. I didn't want to sugarcoat it. That's all.
No.
And I don't think I did.
No, and the at the time the sort of Was you, because you were like sort of 14, 15, 16, that kind of age, was you like the really political songs, the Jam? And the thing with Paul Weller as well is he sings so quick. He has to write more lyrics, I think, because he sings so quick just to get more in. And it's not until you sort of really, you have to really listen to them and realise, Jesus Christ, how much is in them. Was you was you at that young age, because you were young, was you aware of what he was singing about, or were they to you really catchy tunes, or was you like eating rifles and going underground? Was you aware of the politics of it?
Well, I mean, when you hear a tune, say, I don't know, like Going Underground, and you'll see kidney machines replaced by rockets and guns, right?
Yeah.
That's a line that will stay with you. And I remember at the time being very struck by, blimey, that's not, that's really something. And that sort of accorded with where my politics were going. Like I said, I'd been on the Rock Against Racism march the year before, so I was certainly leaning leftwards, politically. And most of the musicians and bands that I liked also seemed to be leaning the same way. The whole thing was a reaction. Rock Against Racism was a reaction to Eric Clapton coming up with some awful racist rant on stage in about 1972. And so people thought, no, the younger musicians have to maybe change this. And Paul was certainly part of that, was really at the vanguard of that sort of thinking. So was I aware? Not fully. I mean, writing this book and re-listening to the lyrics in my 50s, I was like you. I was a little bit struck by thinking, wow, there's a lot of stuff in there that I maybe wasn't totally aware of, but I got the general gist. Do you know?
Yeah. Well,
I got the general gist.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Even in your 40s and 50s, when you read lines like "in going underground," but I want nothing this society has got. I mean, he can't say it a lot clearer than that, can he?
Yeah. Yeah, no, he was pretty clear that he wasn't very impressed. I talk about Paul and how he feels about this country. I've always felt that he was quite patriotic, and I always felt that patriotism, to a certain extent, got a bad name, really, because it was wrapped up with the flag of St George, and there were quite a lot of racists would call themselves patriotic. But I would sort of try and maybe differentiate between patriotism and nationalism, basically. Yes. And I don't think that Paul. I think that Paul would be quite a proud Brit, maybe a proud Englishman, but he wouldn't have liked what was going on in the country. And Thatcher, when Thatcher came along in '79, that was certainly she was someone that we could all go, oh yeah, she's the sort of Brit that we don't like, and we don't like her policies or her way of thinking. So was I fully politically engaged at 16? No, but there was certainly the first stirrings when I heard those songs. That would have helped me think about that stuff in a way that I wouldn't have done without those songs. Yeah,
he sort of properly he articulated it that you probably wouldn't have been able to at that age. None of us could at that age, could we? But because Going Underground came out 10 months after Thatcher came into power, I read. I can't imagine. I mean, hearing that song now hits you in the gut. At the time, what was it like here when you first heard Going Underground? Do you remember?
When I first heard it, it was a powerful song. And when you see the video for Going Underground with nuclear explosions and the pictures of world leaders, villains, some of them, and Thatcher was amongst them, it was a powerful song. And it really captured the imagination of a lot of kids, really. It's one of my favourite Jam tunes, and I still think it's as powerful today as it was when I first heard it.
Yeah, it is definitely. And it went straight to number one, which doesn't sound that big a deal now, because that's what big songs kind of do now. But at that time, you went in at sort of number 6 and then crept up to number one. So for about, even like ABBA didn't go to number one, really. So the Jam, that must have been weird, wasn't it? As a massive fan, it must have been like seeing Arsenal win the Champions League or something.
Well, the thing was, not so much with Going Underground, but certainly when Town Called Malice came out, there was a certain resentment on my part, with all the new fans. I mean, it's weird. I mean, we've all been watching CNN the last few weeks with Donald Trump and the election, right? But the truth is, I'm looking on Twitter and everyone going on about CNN, and I'm thinking, I was watching CNN 8 years ago, right? I watched CNN when Obama got elected. Where were you then? And I sort of resent all these new CNN fans, and I sort of felt the same way about all the new Jam fans when A Town Called Malice came out. And I was moaning to Simon and Warren, my two mates who travel with me a lot on this book. You know, where were these people like 3 years ago? They didn't come to the Hope at Anchor or the Marquee or any of these clubs. Where were they? And obviously it's ridiculous, but you get a certain proprietorial ownership feeling with bands, and I certainly did with them. And you know, in the end, it doesn't matter. They were still my band. They just weren't mine. They were everybody's by that point.
Yeah, I know it's a weird line, isn't it? Where you want everyone, like, why doesn't everyone know how brilliant they are? Everyone should love them. And then when they do, you're like, well, yeah, but they're mine. They're mine.
Yeah, cool.
You say in the book, it's a perfect point, and there should be something some policy put in with bands that you get priority queue. For the fans that are into the band from the start, you should get a priority queue for buying tickets. That's what you said in the book. There should be a different queue for the long-term fans. You're right. I have quite a lot of views which are sort of similar to that, in the same way that when a major event happens in the world, I think comedians and people who do this stuff for a living should be given an hour on Twitter when only we're allowed to tweet about it. And then it's like a sort of, it's like the tape that the police put around a crime scene where you can't go in there yet. Comedians are at work coming up with the best gags for this particular scenario. And then after an hour, everyone has to go. But I know it's selfish, but that's just how I feel. And I certainly, yes, priority boarding, I suppose you'd call it for the band, really. And because queues, you're right. But because in the same way that with cup final tickets, the way we got cup final tickets was, have you been to all the home games? And now you have to go to all the away games as well. Then you get away credits, and then you get first dibs. And that's sort of how it should be with bands as well, in my opinion. But nobody else thinks that. So I'm willing to sign this petition when you start it, Ian. Yeah, we haven't got enough petitions, have we? That's the thing. No, not enough. One a week. Or podcasts, that's why I've started. Or podcasts. That's the other thing we need, podcasts. Yeah, more of them. And I was going to ask you about your friend Simon. He told you about the Comedy Store as well? Yeah, no, he's been a really helpful guiding light. What a good man. Told you about the Jam and the Comedy Store. What a friend. Also, by the way, used to phone round and make sure that 11 players turned up on a Sunday for us to play football. Which, I like this guy. No. Listen, he's very organised in all sorts of ways, Simon. And I do say in the book, everyone needs a Simon. And I'm still mates with him. I write with him sometimes, and he's a good man. Really? But he's a funny boy. He's a very, very funny boy. And he went down to the Comedy Store and then said to me, we've got to go to this place. That was in 1979, but that's when he put my name down for the audience spot. And I went off him a bit then. Well, yeah, got to admit. Yeah, that was not my best night of comedy, I'll be honest with you. As a comedian, I went off him a lot then. He signed you up for an open spot when you were watching and drunk. I don't know. He's got a lot of credit, to be fair. Or got quite a lot of credit in the bank. No, that's true, but he did put me down for the audience spot, and when they read my name out, it was 3 a.m. The next up, Ian Stone, I thought you had to, and I went up there and died horribly, and did two lepers walking down the street. How are you? Mustn't crumble. And got booed. It's fair enough. Got booed off. And the weird thing was that 12 years later, when I went to do my proper first open spot at the Comedy Store, Don Ward, the owner of the Comedy Store, came up to me and went, I know you. I said, I don't think we've met. He said, you've been down here before. And I said, I used to come down here and watch all the time. You'd probably see me in the audience. He said, no, you've been on stage. I went, that was 12 years ago. I did a 5-minute open spot. How do you remember that? He goes, the nose. I remember the nose. And it was very funny. Imagine him saying that very matter of fact as well. Yeah. I didn't take it personally, So that was weird. But to go down there, that's the thing. Again,
you know, the alternative comedy scene in 1979 when it started had a bit of the spirit of the punk movement about it.
That's what I was going to ask you. Yeah, it seemed to be quite interwoven. Like the Jam seemed like because they still play the Jam. Is it the first song when the gig ends? They play the Jam at the Comedy Store.
I think Simon, who's the manager and does the sound down there, he does it for me. I ask him sometimes. He plays Going Underground.
It must have been just when I've been on with you then.
Yeah, it's a possibility. But yeah, no, those tunes are still. I think they're still relevant today, and he still plays them, and that's great. But yeah, that was a big moment for me.
Yeah, when you watch documentaries about there's been like celebrations of the Comedy Store and stuff like that, and when you watch that, they always play the Jam. Because it seemed like that was the music of that. Because 79, when the Comedy Store started, Rick Mayall, you saw Rick Mayall and everyone down there. Rick Mayall and Ade Edmondson looked like they could have been in a band at the time, and it was a lot of anti-Thatcher. Does it seem like that in your head, quite interwoven, the Comedy Store and the Jam and the comedy music of the late 70s?
Like I say, the alternative comedy movement, as it was called back then, it did have a bit of a punk ethic about it. Up to that point, you had men in frilly shirts, mainly men, on the comedians telling jokes about mother-in-laws and things like that. And that is a massive generalisation because there were some brilliant comics, and I used to love Les Dawson and Ken Dodd and a few of the others. But the difference, the sort of punk ethic and you just put together your own stuff and go on stage, that is what the Comedy Store had in the early days. And yeah, look, I was 16, 17 years old, and it was exciting to be out and about in London, going to see gigs and going to see comedy gigs, and in terms of the politics, yeah, it was very left wing. There was a lot of anti-Thatcher stuff, and again, I used to agree with that stuff, and so I was happy to go along and listen to Alexei Sayle ranting about, or Jim Barclay or any of these guys in the early days ranting about Thatcher. It was something I agreed with. So and they were funny sometimes.
Yeah, and then when you went to see the Jam, the thing I liked about roughly how many times do you think you saw them?
30 something, 32, 33, something like that.
But what I like that I've heard sort of stories slightly similar, but not as much, that you said that you used to go and see them as a band. I didn't know this, that they'd just sort of pop out and chat to the audience before the gig, and they'd let you in for the sound check sometimes.
Yeah. Well, John Weller was Paul's dad, and there was a certain group of us who used to go to gigs quite a lot. We'd turn up at the stage door at 3 or 4 in the afternoon in Manchester or Birmingham or in London sometimes. And John would pop his head out. Hello, lads. Hello, John. How are you? Chat. And because they knew us a little bit, we got to know the bouncers and not the bouncers, the roadies a little bit.
Yeah.
And I remember on a cold afternoon one time, John popped out. He said, "It's chilly, lads. You want a cup of tea?" And he made us all a cup of tea, and he invited us in, and we watched the boys do a sound check. And yeah, there were a couple of hundred of us who came in and watched the sound check. And I mean, that, as I remember it, that's the first time I saw Eaton Rifles in a sound check. That the boys walked out and they were tuning up, and then they went, "Oh, this is a new one," and they played Eaton Rifles for us in the sound check. And you do not get that with other bands. I mean, well, maybe you do. I don't know, but that connection,
quite rare. I've not heard it.
I think so. You know, that connect. Well, I've said this before, but John Weller made me one more cup of tea than my dad ever did.
That's a brilliant line.
You know, yeah, that connection. So I've got pictures of me and a few mates sort of around Paul after the gig. We used to hang about after the gig, and they'd sign autographs and chat to us. I mean, I don't think they were particularly deep chats, but they were. It was, you know, you felt blessed really to stand there, and the boys had come out and chat to us. So yeah, there was a real connection. And like I say, I'm not sure there's many bands who do that.
No, well, you sort of know because you saw a lot. So I try to make a list of the bands you saw. It was unbelievable. I mean, you'd seen the Clash, the Pogues, and the Jam by the age of 15. Don't know if you remember that in the book.
And Tom Robinson, and Steel Pulse, and Sham 69. There was a couple of others at the Rock Against Racism March as well. But yeah, I saw a lot of live music.
Yeah, you saw Dexys Midnight Runners, you saw
I
the
love
Undertones,
Yeah.
Iggy Pop, you saw the U2 support the Jam at the Marquee.
No, not the Jam. I saw U2.
U2.
No, not the Jam. They supported the Photos, who was a band. They were a band. The lead singer was a very beautiful woman called Wendy Wu, and they had one hit with Irene, and they were on, and the support band were U2.
You saw the U2 as a support band.
I know. I saw Status Quo quite in 1979, I think, because I wasn't just. I mean, as much as I like the punk stuff, I mean, I saw Motorhead and Stafford Bingley Hall.
Oh, you hitchhiked. That's a brilliant story. That
I
You
did. I hitchhiked on a motorbike.
Stafford.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was very lucky. We lived in West Hendon at the time, and I said to my mum, I'm going to a gig, and off I went about 2 p.m, and I walked about half a mile down to Brent Cross where the M1 started, and I stuck
Yeah.
my finger out on my thumb, and after about 10 minutes, this bloke in a motorbike pulled up. And he goes to me, "Where you going, mate?" And I said, "I'm going to see Motorhead at Stafford Bingley Hall. Can you get me close?" And he turned round and he had Motorhead on the back of his leather jacket. He goes, "You're in luck, mate." And he gave me a helmet, and I jumped on the bike, and he gave me a lift to Stafford Bingley Hall. I've no idea how I got home, but listen. Live music is. I mean, I love live comedy, right? I do live comedy. I think it's an amazing thing. But live music, to me, is transcendent. I can't really describe it. And I was at Glastonbury last year, and I saw some amazing stuff. And I think there's nothing like it. It's what, to be honest, Andrew, gives me hope for the future. That I think those communal things that we all love being together, enjoying an artist, and
Yeah.
I think that is what is going to bring us back together. The arts. It's going to heal us after this COVID shit. And
Yes.
and I absolutely love live music, and I always have. And so, any chance to get out of the house, so I went to see whoever I could.
There's nothing quite like being at a live gig when the lead singer sort of puts the mic out and the whole crowd sings a song. There's
mate,
something like that, isn't there?
I saw Queen at the Rainbow in 1979, right? And seeing Freddie, who's the most amazing frontman you'll ever see, leading us all in various songs, and we're all singing along.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very beautiful and very moving. And at the end of it, you feel like, I don't know, you feel, God, this is going to sound a little bit zen, but you feel at one, don't you, with everyone when you see things
The
like
whole
that.
room of people singing together. You definitely do, yeah.
Yeah, so
Unbelievable feeling.
It's a great feeling. So I wanted to get that feeling whenever I could, and so and like I say, anything to get me out of the house. So
Yeah, well,
two birds with one stone.
You saw Queen. You said in the book, in a week, you saw the Jam 3 times, Queen, and the Police.
Yes,
within a
5
week.
nights in a row at the Rainbow Theatre.
Did you? You didn't go see see Arsenal that week as well, did you?
Very
Surely
probably.
not.
Very probably. It was December
You were out the
79.
house a
I mean,
lot.
I was out the house a lot, but I also spent pretty much my entire life in Finsbury Park, really.
Yeah.
Because it was all round there. I mean, that is a venue that I know better than almost any other venue, and I'm really sad that it's not still a music venue. It's now a sort of Christian Baptist sort of house or something. But it's not a live music venue anymore, and it's such a shame because it's a great venue. We used to look up who was on and then buy tickets and just go down there, and that was a good week. I enjoyed that week.
Yeah, sounds like a good week. I've never been.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've never been. Was it called the Rainbow Rooms?
The Rainbow Theatre.
The Rainbow Theatre. When did that shut? Because I've never.
I think
been
it would have shut maybe 1990, something like that.
Right.
The thing about live music is, I don't know. I think the festivals started getting going at that point in a big way, and I think more people get their live music fix at festivals now. So there are less venues than there used to be, and I think that's a terrible shame. But so when live music made a sort of comeback in terms of venues, the Rainbow Theatre was already owned by him upstairs, and he doesn't relinquish venues that easily, does he? So
No, he's not getting the numbers in either.
Well, that was the thing. I always thought that some of the bands I saw would have pulled bigger numbers, but hey, what do I know? So it's a terrible shame what happened, but I love that venue.
What are some of the venues that you miss around London, or some of your favourites that you? Because you talk about the Hammersmith Odeon, but people would know that as the Apollo.
Yes, the Apollo. Yes.
Now, like you talked about sneaking in, climbing up to the roof.
We went to see the Police, and we didn't have tickets, and I ended up climbing up onto the roof with about 7 people following me. I don't know why they were following me, but I ended up on the roof, and I went through a door, and the Police had just come on when we managed to get in, but we couldn't find a way downstairs. And then somebody was shining a torch at us, going, "What the hell are you doing up here?" And we got brought down off the roof like the idiots we were, 16-year-olds climbing about on the roof at Hammersmith Odeon. And then somebody leant against the door and it fell in, and we all jumped in, and we got in to see the gig, which was great. I just wanted to see live music. By the way, I've looked up the Arsenal fixtures for December 1979. I think that week we had Norwich at home. I'd have gone to that. I was going to every game. And so I would have been...
I love the way
I'd have got to see the Jam 3 times, the Police, Queen, and Arsenal at home to Norwich. 1-1. It was, just in case you're wondering.
I'm glad you've cleared that up.
Context, I think, is very important.
God, you were committed. I mean, and you because you travelled around. Because before doing gigs, the amount we travel as comedians, you'd already done that before you even started stand up. Because you're watching Arsenal everywhere. You're travelling around watching the Jam everywhere. You went to Brighton the year after Quadrophenia. That must have been like quite a good atmosphere. I like the story of it. Was it Robert there who decided to ring his parents because he'd not told them he'd gone down to Brighton?
Yeah, that was a bit unfortunate. We 4 of us went down, or 3 of us, and then we met Warren, who was our other mate. And then Robert decided to call his parents, and his parents demanded that he come home. So he went. We sold his ticket, and he went home. And we all laughed at him, but I'm really not sure why he called his mum at all. But anyway, thing is, I told my parents or my mother at the time that I was going, so she knew. Yeah. But Robert obviously didn't, and he ended up having to come home. But his loss. It was Brighton.
Oh.
We had to go and see the Jam in Brighton. That was like that was analogous to me. As a Jewish person going to the Wailing Wall for the first time, right? It was that sort of religious experience. Yeah. Only I actually believed in the Jam, And we'd seen Quadrophenia, so we hung out on Brighton Beach. I've been to Brighton before. I had been down there. I can't remember if it was to see football, but I'd definitely been to Brighton before. Day trip maybe. But I did travel around the country quite a bit. Yeah, of course. If I could get tickets to see him in Manchester or Birmingham or Poole, I remember going to, Reading, I would, because, why not?
Yeah, and then you went to the hotel, you found out where the hotel was, and you were getting kicked out, and Paul Weller said the immortal words, "They're with a band."
Yeah. No, don't worry, don't kick these lads out, they're with us. And in we went. That was the first time I was ever with the band. We weren't with the band. We were just in the hotel lobby. The hotel bar. But it was nice of him to do that.
Band.
Yeah, it was very nice of him to do that. He didn't have to do that. But he, like I say, he cared about his young fans. He did. And, he was protective of us. And that's something, right?
Yeah. The last time you saw them was, I think it was a radio recording
at the Golders Green Hippodrome.
Yeah, they were doing a recording for a TV show, a radio show, and you went to see them, and that was about 15 minutes from where you lived or something. So you sort of saw them near where you grew up, followed them all around the country, and then the last time you see them is I think it was a recording.
Yes.
Of a TV show, a radio show near your house.
Yeah.
And you went to see them, and you ended up in McDonald's with some members of Bananarama.
Yes, and the lead singer of Department S, who were a band who had one hit called Is Vic There? And they were supporting the Jam. And he came out after the gig. I can't think of his name. Vaughan Toulouse. I can't think of his name. Vaughan Toulouse. Which I only just got the pun now, 40 years later. You know what? That is really, wow, what a moment that was. Anyway, Vaughan Toulouse.
He played the long game with a few of us, didn't he?
He did. He's sadly no longer with us. I'd love to be able to tell him. But yes, he came out and and a couple of members of Bananarama were there because I think he was going out with one of them. And they said, does anyone know anywhere to eat round here? And I said, I just happened to be nearby. I said, there's a McDonald's over there. I said, should we go? And they went, yeah. So we all went to McDonald's with me and Siobhan Fahy and who was in Bananarama and one of the others, and Vaughan Toulouse. And yeah, that was... I was going to say it was one of the most exciting moments of my life, but it wasn't really. We just had a burger and fries and a milkshake, you know. But it was nice enough.
Yeah, it sounds like a weird dream that no one's going to believe when you describe that in the morning. Yeah. A McDonald's with some of Bananarama.
2 out of 3. 2/3, 66.5% of Bananarama. And the lead singer of Department S.
Yeah, that's enough for a McDonald's, isn't it?
I would say.
Can't ask for more than that. Yeah. And then, so the last single, was it the last single? Number 1, Town Called Malice. And then they split up not long after that, about 8 months after that or something. I don't think Town Called Malice was the last single. I'm not totally sure, to be honest with you. I've never been, as much as I obsessed about the band and I love listening to them, I've never been one of these guys who knows what the set list was at a particular gig or when singles came out. I had to look all this stuff up beforehand. So I haven't had any angry, irate phone calls or messages from Jam fans saying you got that completely wrong. That was a year, because I thought I don't need. So I looked it up, but it's not something I ever knew. But they decided to split up, yeah. I mean, because I've got to say, as a fan of a band, you were pretty spoiled. 5 years. Now I looked this up because I knew it was a lot of singles because I've heard it, but I didn't know the exact amount, so I looked it up. They've released, is this right? 17 singles. You tell me. 6 albums in 5 years. Jesus, some bands take them 5 years to release one album. Yeah, so you were absolutely smashed over the head for 5 years, non-stop music, and then bang, it finished. What was that like? That must have been. Well, it was painful. You weren't softened up for it at all, because a lot of bands, you see them slowly peter out. You can sense it's coming. They haven't released an album in years. They were number 1, loads of albums, and then suddenly finished. It was upsetting, Bertie, to be honest with you. It was. I mean, you know, I relied on them really to a certain extent for some sort of guidance as to how to, you know, what to think and how to live my life. And when they split, I was 19 years old, and it was a shock. But I'm over it now, you know. Yeah. It's taken me 40 years. No, it was, you know what? I think there are times when you know, it was, as people say, my formative years, and you know, you're looking for help from a responsible adult, and I wasn't really getting it from my parents, but Paul provided that. So when he suddenly went, "You're on your own," he didn't phone me personally and say that, but when it was, "You're on your own," I did feel a bit lost, certainly. And that continued for quite some time, but, you know, you find other things. That's why I didn't listen to the Style Council very much, because I was too angry, if you like. And the Style Council also did not suit my mood at the time. That sort of preppy, light, more soulful stuff. I didn't want to listen to that. I wanted to listen to angry songs about Thatcher and police brutality and all the rest of it. And so, you know, Paul wasn't there for me anymore, but I totally understand from his point of view now, as an artist. You just go, all right, next thing. But at the time, I was very upset, yes. It must have been like seeing an ex with a new boyfriend. Yeah, I suppose so. I suppose there was a little bit of that, really. I listen, you know what? At some point, you've got to move on with your life, haven't you? And I was 19. He went, "You're on your own, mate. Go on." And
I think 5 years is enough. I also like the fact that they quit while they were very much ahead. You don't get that very often.
No,
And,
you didn't get to see them sort of, slowly
no.
deteriorating and releasing bad albums. You didn't get any of that.
No, they did their thing, and then they went, that'll do. And what an amazing thing to do. And they're never going to reform. And I like that about them as well.
Yeah,
to be
that's
honest
good.
With you.
Yeah, I like that. That's good.
Well, they interviewed him on Sky Arts for their documentary. And they asked the other two, they asked Bruce and Rick, would you think about reforming? And they both went, yeah, if the time's right and we feel like we want to do it, then that'd be great. And they asked Paul Weller, and he looked at the camera and he went, no fucking way. And I thought, good on you, mate. Good on you. It was of its time. We loved it at the time. And I'm just happy to listen to the tunes, really. And I saw Weller live a couple of years ago, and he did a couple of jam tunes, and that was fine. It was nice to hear them.
All you need.
Yeah,
like visiting old friends. So why do you think? Because you can, after reading the book, I don't know if I knew you were a massive Jam fan before, but as soon as I saw that you'd written a book, I kind of went, oh, of course, it's kind of made sense. And because, like you say, you're not, I wouldn't say you're massively political on stage, but you can tell when you're on stage, you can tell you've read a paper in the last week. Do you know what I mean? You can tell it's informed you a lot. Now, there's, again, there's political unrest, there's, Brexit, all of that. Before COVID, all of that. Tory government, not most people don't like. Why do you think there's not a band like the Jam around now?
I mean, I think the music is political now. I just don't think it's not the same. I mean, it's maybe not for people of my age or even your age, to be honest with you. But, Stormzy was at Glastonbury a couple of years ago, and that's political. That's, grime is definitely political. So I think there is stuff out there, but I'm not sure it's stuff that I would necessarily listen to that much or connect with that much. So I'm not sure I accept the premise of the question. I think music is still political, certainly for some people. Certainly.
Yeah, it's just not in that now. It's more kind of grime. It's not. You don't get one definitive band like you kind of used to.
No, it's different. Music is very different now. It's much more sort of diffuse, really. It's so people will find their own audiences. There are people who are. I mean, my son went to Reading Festival a couple of years ago. Yeah. I didn't know half the artists on there, but these are people who've sold 500,000. They've had a couple of billion downloads, and they've sold all sorts of merch and all the rest of it. And they're just as popular as the Jam were back in the day, but it's a very different industry now, and so I think there's probably all sorts of political stuff out there that I'm not aware of.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like I suppose I don't know any sort of modern bands and that and a lot, like you say, a lot of it's all over YouTube, Spotify, everywhere. But when even when I was younger, it was just Top of the Pops. Yeah, John Peel, and that was it. So if there was a big band, everyone knew.
Old Grey Whistle Test was the only other one, and that's about it. Whereas now, you've got 25 music channels at your disposal, and Spotify means you've got pretty much every bit of music ever written, if you want, and iTunes and all the rest of it. So, I think there are plenty of politicised singers and bands out there, but. It's possible that I'm not aware of all of them.
Yeah. Do you know any of the bands that how old are your sons?
22 and 18.
All right. So do you know any of the music they're into? Have they told you about any of it, or?
Yeah. I mean, some of it's great, and it's not just the stuff that my kids bring me. I watched, I Will Destroy You, the Michaela Cole thing on BBC, and the music in that was great. There was some great music in there that I'd never heard. Every year you get FIFA. When you get FIFA on the Xbox, there's a whole playlist, and you hear all these tunes. You think, oh, I like that one. That's a good one.
That's where you're getting your new music through FIFA.
Some of it. Sometimes I listen to Six Music. There's all sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of outlets, and my kids do bring me stuff from time to time. And some of it I like, and some of it I don't.
So if you So at the end of the book, have you see? So you see Simon, quite a lot still, and Robert and Warren.
Yes, I still
Feel like
speak
I know
to
your
Robert
friends a
and
bit as well.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Do you go and see live music with them still? You said you did with Simon.
With them, not so much actually. I don't. I mean, it's like I go. I mean, I went to Glastonbury last year, and I in fact I go there quite regularly when I get the chance. You know, when it's on, and you know, I saw and you see all sorts of different stuff there as well. And it's as I said to you earlier, seeing live music is such a blast. It really is.
Yeah.
And I my appreciation of it hasn't really faded. It's still the same feeling that I get. I saw Lizzo at Glastonbury last year, and it's not R&B's not really my thing, but she blew me away. The show that she gave. I saw Beyonce there 7 or 8 years ago. One of the best things I've ever seen. It's
really.
It's just seeing people who are at the top of their game. I know a couple of songs from Beyonce, right? I knew Crazy in Love, which I think is an absolutely fantastic song. And to see her do that live was really a thrill. So it continues to thrill me and to make me feel happy.
That is good to hear.
As long as that goes on, I'll continue to listen to it.
Yeah, and at the end of the book as well, that I wanted to, you don't have to tell me anything he said, but what a great ending that you got a phone call from Paul Weller at the end.
Yeah.
How did that happen? How was that?
A mutual friend. A mutual
got
friend.
The book to him.
Yes, I said to our mutual friend, can you you know Paul Weller, don't you? He said, yeah. I said, can you get a sort of early draft of the book to him? He said, of course. So I printed it all out, and I bound it together as best I could, and I picked out a very nice card, and I wrote a nice message in the card. I spent a long time on this, you know.
Just a little drop of aftershave. You thought you might like
scent. That's right.
Yeah.
And I sent it via our friend to Paul, and then my friend was sending me back screenshots of text messages from Paul saying, I love your mate's book, I'm going to call him, which is great. And then he phoned me up and he said, hi Ian, it's Paul Weller. And I wanted to go, I know. I know, of course I know it's you. I recognise your voice anywhere. But I just went, oh, hey Paul, how you doing? Like he phones me all the time. And that's the first thing he said to me was, I really like your book. I'd forgotten how shit it was in the 70s. And I said, oh man, can I use that as a quote on the front cover? And he said, yeah, of course. And then we spoke for about 45 minutes about that time and about the music and about the violence and about where I grew up and where he grew up and his old man. And it was great. And I've since met him a couple of times. I had a long chat with him for about clothes for a magazine. I wrote a piece, and I met him. I had a bite to eat with him before a gig, and he's in fact, when he phoned me up last time, he went, "All right, Stoney, how's the book going?" Is what he said, and I thought, "Wow,
Stoney,
I know,
Stoney, it's lovely. Stoney by Paul Weller.
It's lovely, isn't it? And
what a great end!
It's
that
a
must
lovely
have made
thing.
the book worthwhile. I mean, it would have been worthwhile anyway. But what a great reward for writing that book.
It's a lovely thing. I mean, he keeps saying he wants to come to a gig, which is good. You know, that's another level altogether. But you know, hopefully we'll be able to arrange that at some point. And listen, it's nice. I've got to know him a little bit. He's a good guy, and he likes what I did, and obviously I loved what he did. And so, you know, there's a bit of mutual respect there. It's there's worse things, right?
Because he'd had a lot of books written about him, I imagine, from
quite a few, yeah. But he's very supportive of that stuff. He's very supportive of that stuff. But he really, he said he really enjoyed it, and I believed him, and that's one of the many nice things about writing a book is you get things like that, and it was a thrill. Of course, it was.
Yeah. So the book is called Again to Be Someone. It's not just about the jam. It is just about being obsessed with a band, which, you know, most people can relate to that. It's honestly brilliant. I loved it.
Thank you.
And I'll be telling people about it. And just to sum up, what if you was just chatting to somebody, I'm sure you do this, and you were talking and the topic of the jam came up, say they're a bit younger or They're just like, oh yeah, I've heard a couple of tunes. They don't really know the Jam. How, you don't have to, but how would you kind of, in summary, try and tell them how great the Jam were, why they meant so much, and why you don't have to listen to them, but why you would recommend they love the Jam?
Well, I suppose what you do really, it's hard. The hardest thing I found with this book was describing feelings about music and about lyrics, because I'm not that keen on music analysis or analysis of art generally, really, in the same way that we do comedy. And, if somebody said, why would you recommend Ian Stone? You'd say, oh, because he's funny, right? He knows what he's doing and he's really funny and he and he talks about politics or whatever you would say. But the main thing would be, oh, he's funny, right? In the same way that I think with the Jam, that's assuming you do think I'm funny. But I know you do, it's all right. But with the Jam, I'd say listen to some of the tunes. It's the only way really to get a proper connection with any artist is to look at what they do and listen to what they do. But why would I recommend them? Just because John Weller, Paul's dad, said the best fucking band in the world is what he said at the time, and that's what I felt. That's what I felt then.
Yeah, you can't argue with Paul Weller's dad, can you?
Well, no, you don't want to argue with his dad. No, he was quite a tough-looking guy, actually, John Weller. But he and I liked the fact that he introduced the band. That was something else as well. I really like that. But
I've never seen that.
It's hard. It's hard, really, to describe your feelings about music. I hope they came across in the book, but I
definitely did.
I connected with them in a way that at the time I hadn't really connected with anything else, and now I mean anything else. I'm not just talking about music, and I suppose football was the other one, but that's a slightly different sort of thing going on there. But yeah, they spoke to me in a way that I hadn't really been spoken to before, and if somebody was asking me whether they should listen to them, I said, well, listen to them, and hopefully you'll get the same feeling.
Perfect. I think you nailed it there.
Thanks, man.
A podcast from producer Paul.co.uk.